The Oppo Find 7a and the OnePlus One, practically brethren of the smartphone world. Both made by the same company, more or less, both housing almost the same specs. So let's see how they add up. And let's start with the front of the phone. On the front of each phone, you're going to find the same exact 5.5-inch IPS display with a pixel density of 401. The key difference is the OnePlus One is sporting a new kind of technology in their screen, and that is called touch-on-lens technology. It's going to add for more durability, and it's going to add for more vibrant colors, giving the screen a much more realistic look. And if you take a look here at the side, it's almost like the bezel does not touch the screen. The LED notification lights are different. On the OnePlus One, you have your standard blinking LED light. On the Oppo Find 7a, you have almost like a pulsar light. It's very, very elegant, and this is one of the key things I love about the Oppo Find 7a. Both phones have capacitive buttons at the bottom, and both phones have very, very poor visibility with these capacitive buttons. But the OnePlus One has an edge up on the Oppo Find 7a, and that's the ability to turn on-screen buttons. And this allows for much, much better visibility and more usefulness of these buttons because they're fully customizable. You can add buttons, you can take away buttons, and you can also change the order in which the on-screen buttons are in. It's very, very useful, and that is why the OnePlus One has the edge over the Oppo Find 7a. Both phones feature the same 5-megapixel camera on the front with the ambient light sensor and a proximity sensor. The difference is the camera is on the right side of the speaker on the Oppo, and it's on the left side of the OnePlus One. Taking a look at the bottom, you can see both have their dedicated chargers, as well as the OnePlus One has the dual stereo speakers on the bottom of it, along with the microphone. In terms of thickness, the OnePlus One is thinner than the Oppo Find 7a. It's not by much, but it is enough for you to notice when holding it in the hand. The button colors are also different, as the Oppo Find 7a is like a chrome, and the OnePlus One is like a polished black. Moving on to the back, you can see both phones are sporting the same 13-megapixel rear camera with dual LED flash, as well as the microphones on the back, and both have their name branding as well below the camera. When it comes to the design and feel of these two phones, they have different textures. The Oppo Find 7a is much more grainy. It's going to give you a much more better grip, while the OnePlus One is made of cashew nuts, and it's almost as soft as baby skin. It's very, very soft, and it feels good in the hand, but it doesn't have that grip that the Oppo Find 7a comes with. In terms of in-the-hand feel, I have to give the edge to the Oppo Find 7a. Despite it being thicker and weighing more, it does have a better feeling in the hand due to that texturized back. I do prefer the weight of the OnePlus One over the Oppo Find 7a, and I think once they release the other casings and I can get a different back, that'll fix my problem. But for now, I have to give it to the Oppo Find 7a. In terms of button layout, both phones have the same volume rocker and power button, but the difference is they're switched. The power button is actually on the left side of the Oppo, and it's on the right side of the OnePlus One. So if you're right-handed and you use your thumb to hit that power button, it's going to be easier to use the OnePlus One. At least that's what I feel. So I prefer the more ergonomical structure of the OnePlus One due to myself being right-handed. Now I do like the Oppo Find 7a button layout, but if I had to choose between the two, I would definitely choose OnePlus. It's also important to note that I appreciate both companies putting these buttons in a position on the phone that it's easily accessible with one hand. So whether you're right-handed or left-handed, you should not have a problem with using these buttons. The Oppo Find 7a sports a removable back, and it's not removable just for no reason at all. When you remove it, you have access to removing and replacing the 2800 milliamp battery, as well as adding an SD card up to 128 gigabytes. So it's very, very useful, and that's where it has the edge up over the OnePlus. Although the OnePlus does feature a removable back, you don't have access to the battery nor an SD card slot. It's only removable to replace the back later on in the year when OnePlus releases these new backplates. Although both phones feature the same exact display, you can actually see the difference with that touch-on-lens display here. The Oppo Find 7a has better color saturation, and you can actually see the blue in the sky, when the OnePlus One just has a brighter screen altogether. Both phones have above average viewing angles, so it doesn't matter if you look from the bottom or from the side, you're always going to have excellent viewing angles, and that is thanks to the IPS displays. Outside viewing or direct sunlight viewing is a different story, but since the touch-on-lens display offers an increased brightness, the OnePlus One is going to have the edge up over the Oppo Find 7a when viewing your screen in direct sunlight. Call quality on both phones is good. but the OnePlus One is suffering from a call quality bug that actually has reduced sound. So until they fix that, we have to give the edge up to the Oppo Find 7a. Once OnePlus fixes this bug, we can always go back and recompare. In terms of speaker volume, the OnePlus One definitely outperforms the Oppo Find 7a, and this is just because of the speaker placement. Instead of being on the rear of the phone, the speakers are on the bottom.
From our old and chipping at me, takes me away, takes me away, takes me away, takes me away, takes me away. Covered in ivy green. The windows that we watch from are old and chipping at me.
In terms of software, both phones are running different operating systems. The Oppo Find 7a is running Color OS on top of Android 4.3, while the OnePlus One is running CyanogenMod 11s on top of Android KitKat. Both phones offer a similar but different user experience. Both phones have very high customizations, so you can customize things such as your icons, your sound packs, just different themes altogether. While both phones also are different because the CyanogenMod is much more like stock Android versus Color OS. Although you can get a theme, which is the Jelly Bean theme, to make Color OS much more similar to stock Android, it's still not quite the same as CyanogenMod. In terms of quick settings, the Color OS, if you just pull down your notification bar and then pull down one more time, you're going to get your quick settings. With CyanogenMod, if you pull down from the right corner, you're going to get access to your quick settings on the fly as well. So different gestures have different effects with the operating systems of these two phones. In terms of software performance, neither phone will disappoint you. Neither phone I've experienced a lot of lag, and if I did experience lag, it was more on the OnePlus side, and that's just for the few bugs that they have to weed out through the operating system. But overall, the performance has been silky smooth on both phones, and as you can see, even the animated backgrounds on the Oppo Find 7a run absolutely beautiful, and the same goes for the CyanogenMod on the OnePlus One. You can actually load some of the Nexus type backgrounds, and they run perfect with no problems whatsoever. The only thing I did notice was that on the OnePlus One, the laser beam or phaser beam background tends to run a lot slower than it does on a Nexus. Since both phones house almost identical displays except for that touch-on lens technology, both phones are going to have identical viewing experiences. So whether you're watching YouTube videos or watching a movie on your phone, it's almost going to be an identical experience, except for the OnePlus One tends to get brighter and more accurate colors, while the Oppo Find 7a has a little bit darker colors and better color saturation. So it all depends on what you want to do. It's hardly noticeable though when side by side, but if you look close, you can actually see the difference. Personally, between the two, I choose the Oppo Find 7a screen over the OnePlus. With the Oppo Find 7a, you have access to gestures. So if the screen is off and you draw a circle, you can open the camera app. If the screen is off and you do a V, you have access to the flashlight. But the Oppo takes it a step further. If you go into the Settings app and launch Motions and Gestures, you can actually go into a setting that allows you to match an app to a gesture. They have a list of gestures to choose from, and you just pick the app that corresponds with that gesture. But even one more than that, you can actually assign in-app gestures, and you can fully customize these, and to access them, you just pull down from the left of the status bar to access a screen that will allow you to draw a gesture, and you can customize it to whatever you want to launch whatever app you want. The OnePlus One also sports gestures, but they're nowhere near as advanced as that. They are just a simple draw a circle when the screen is off to launch the camera, or draw a V while the screen is off if you want access to the flashlight. Both phones also have the double tap to turn the screen on, but the OnePlus has the double tap the status bar to turn the screen off. In terms of internal performance, both have the Snapdragon 801 processor, but the OnePlus One is clocked slightly higher at 2.5 GHz versus the 2.3 GHz on the Oppo Find 7a. The OnePlus One also has 3 GB of RAM versus the Oppo Find 7a's 2 GB of RAM. Both phones have the Adreno 330 for graphic performance, and neither phone will disappoint. In terms of frame rates or just overall gaming, you're not going to experience any problems from either one of these phones. When doing a lot of extensive multitasking or playing high graphic games, you might see a slight advantage with the OnePlus One, but doing day-to-day tasks, you're hardly going to notice a difference between these two phones. Although both phones get significantly hot during extensive gameplay, I have noticed the OnePlus One does get a bit hotter than the Oppo Find 7a. But after experimenting a little bit and closing down all my background apps, it did run cooler after an extensive amount of gameplay, but as I said, neither phone will disappoint. It's just the OnePlus One did run a tad bit hotter than the Oppo Find 7a during gameplay. So I wanted to put these specs up against each other and see how they stacked up, and as expected, the OnePlus One did beat the Oppo Find 7a. It wasn't by a significant amount, but it did overall perform better during the Geekbench, Manhattan, and T-Rex test. Next, I wanted to perform the Antutu benchmark test against each other, and this one actually surprised me a lot. Despite the overall higher end specs on the OnePlus One, the Oppo Find 7a actually beat the OnePlus One when it came to the Antutu benchmark test. In terms of battery life and performance, both phones will last you through a full days of use easily. I got better performance with the OnePlus One, and that's just due to the 3100 mAh battery versus the 2800 mAh battery on the Oppo Find 7a. I got about 3.5 hours of on-screen time with the Oppo Find 7a versus about 4.5 with the OnePlus One. But the Oppo Find 7a has its advantages. It's the fact that it has a removable battery so you can swap it out anytime, and the fact that it has the rapid charging. The rapid charging gives it the ability to charge from 0 to 100% in about an hour, versus the OnePlus, which takes anywhere between an hour and a half to 2.5 hours to charge from 0 to 100%, since it does not officially support rapid charging. This may change when they start sending out the official accessories that are made for the OnePlus One. Now, a phone can't be a phone unless it receives good cellular signals and good Wi-Fi signals, and I'm happy to say that either one of these phones will not disappoint. Recently, I stated that the OnePlus One had Wi-Fi and cellular issues, but when I put these two phones together, that wasn't the case. In fact, the OnePlus One outperformed the Oppo Find 7a when it came to download speed, and the Oppo Find 7a outperformed the OnePlus when it came to upload speed, when connected to the same Wi-Fi network. One of the biggest differences between these two phones is price. The OnePlus One goes for $299 for the 16GB and $349 for the 64GB, while the Oppo Find 7a goes for $500 for the 16GB, which can be expanded with a micro SD card, and it has a removable battery. Although both phones have the exact same 13MP 6-lens camera with a Sony Exmor sensor on the rear of the phone, they have different camera apps and different processing software. The Oppo Find 7a is very straightforward. It has the record button on the bottom with the camera button on the bottom as well as access to your gallery. The three little dots at the bottom right are going to give you access to your shooting modes. The settings in the top left are going to give you access to your 4K capability as well as shooting in RAW and some white balance settings and so forth. And next to that you have access to your flash, and next to that you have access to your front-facing camera as you see here. The touch-to-focus system on the Oppo Find 7a is very fast. In fact, the entire camera interface is very similar to iOS, so if you're used to Apple when you're coming to the Oppo, you'll feel right at home. The pinch-to-zoom gesture on the Oppo Find 7a is also very responsive, so you don't need to worry about that. One of the killer features the Oppo Find 7a's camera offers is the ability to take a 50MP shot. What it does is it takes several images of your subject, combines them together, and it creates a 50MP picture. And what this allows for is if you want to do a lot of cropping or you want to do a lot of zooming, it's going to allow that due to that increased pixel resolution. The OnePlus One had a similar feature. It was called Super Zoom, but when they released that initial update, they did away with that feature in the camera app. Although the camera app on the OnePlus One or Cyanogen Mod 11S is much more simplistic, don't let that fool you. It is packed full of features. If you go into the settings, you can see you have access to your image size, the quality of your image, burst mode, focusing mode, touch to focus, your ISO, just different things like that. On the video side, you have access to 4K UHD as well as 4K DCI, and it goes all the way down to a ridiculously small video. You can also shoot slow motion in 120 frames per second in 720p or 60 frames per second in 1080p. And you can also do a time lapse. In the last setting, you can use the power button to take a picture and the volume rocker to zoom in, as well as a left-handed mode. You also have access to your shooting modes of your preference or your favorites on the fly. Just take your finger and scroll up and down, and it will give you a live view of what the picture is going to look like in that shooting mode. On the bottom of the camera app, you have your panorama button, your picture button, as well as your video button. On the right, you can turn on the front-facing camera. You have access to flash. The circle is actually what's going to access your shooting modes. So just click on the circle and then click on the little wand. Once you click on the wand, it will pull up all your different shooting modes. To put one in your favorites or on the fly, you just click the circle that is by the name of the setting. Everything is pretty much straightforward, very simplistic, and an excellent user experience when dealing with the camera on CyanogenMod. It provides tons of different settings and shooting modes without being too overbearing. I really like it, and this is where the OnePlus has the edge over the Oppo Find 7a in terms of camera. The touch to focus works well, and this is where the software comes in. Even though they both have the exact same camera, the touch to focus seems to work better on the Oppo Find 7a. It's a little bit faster and just more responsive. And the same can be said with pinch to zoom. Due to those settings that you can access on the fly, sometimes while you're pinching to zoom, you might actually switch to a different shooting mode. So a comparison wouldn't be a comparison without having some sample images compared with each other and some video footage. So I went ahead and did that and pieced everything together for you. So I hope you guys enjoyed the images and all the video. Well guys, you reached the end of the video and I'm now shooting my final words with the front-facing camera of the Oppo and the front-facing camera of the OnePlus. The image quality is a little bit better on the Oppo, I can go ahead and tell you that, but as for microphone, since I'm recording, I don't know how it sounds, so you guys be the judge. But overall, I would say go with the OnePlus. That is my recommendation and that's what I would do, only because you're getting better specs and just an overall better user experience with the OS. I prefer CyanogenMod over the Color OS. just because it's more like stock Android. But again, you know, everybody has their own cup of tea, and that might be your thing is ColorOS. So you guys be the judge, and you guys get what you want to get. But my suggestion is go ahead and get the OnePlus, or wait for the Oppo Find 7, as it's going to have even better specs than the Find 7a, and specs that will match if not beat the OnePlus. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, leave me a comment in the section below, follow me on all my social media networks, and I will definitely see you in the next video. Take it easy, guys.